Hi, welcome to our channel, Ancient to Modern, and this is episode 21 on our journey through the New Testament. We are going deeper into the New Testament and deeper into Paul's letters in this installment, and this will start some questions, hopefully, as we go through two books today. I want to go through the letter to the Philippians and the letter to the Colossians. Now, these are different in that Paul was very well acquainted with the church at Philippi, and we don't think that Paul really had any first-hand knowledge or started himself the church at Colossae. But Paul wrote both of these letters at roughly the same time. We know later in life Paul was arrested. He took his friend Timothy back to Jerusalem with him. Now, Timothy was Jewish. He had a Jewish mother, but Timothy probably looked like a Roman. He was clean-shaven. And so Paul took Timothy into the temple. Well, they saw Paul there with this clean-shaven person and assumed that Paul had brought a Gentile. Even at the end of life, Paul was still not trusted. A riot broke out, and Paul was blamed, and he was arrested, which started this last 4 years of his life, or maybe the last 8 or 9. Depends on when we think Paul died. And so Paul had 4 years of imprisonment here. He had 2 years in Caesarea, and then he was taken to Rome, and he had 2 years under house arrest in Rome. Both of these letters were written when Paul was imprisoned. But we just don't know if it meant the first 2 years when he was on the seacoast of the Mediterranean, still in Israel, at Caesarea, or whether this represented some of his work when he was in Rome, maybe in 60, 61. But these are both referred to as prison letters. Let's talk Philippians first. Philippians is perhaps the church with which Paul had the warmest relations. We don't have the problems that we see in Galatia. We don't have the moral problems we see in the church in Corinth. And it's the only church that really Paul founded. And so Paul's writing to a group of people he knows very, very well. And so in this letter, first of all, the Philippian church was probably started very early in 49 or 50 with, we remember the story of Acts, the Philippian jailer. Maybe started with the Philippian jailer when Paul and Silas were in prison there. It had become a church with very strong financial resources. And Paul was leaning on this church to give a strong offering that he could take back to Jerusalem, relieve some of the problems there. So it was one of Paul's most beloved congregations. This letter is a thank you for past financial support, and also written to maybe head off some potential divisions in the future that Paul didn't want to see happen. Paul has a couple of interesting things in Philippians. The first is this hymn in chapter 2. Jesus, though he was God, did not cling to his rights as God, but laid aside his mighty power. The start of that one. That was a hymn that was maybe sung in the church. Paul incorporated into his letter in Philippians. It kind of is an expression of the attitude we're to have, that we're always looking to not cling to our own rights, cling to what's rightfully mine. We're always to live this willingness to be sacrificial, this willingness to be open to others. That's really what Philippians is all about. Colossians is a little different. Colossians is written to a church that Paul's not as familiar with. And we think that it's written to address a growing heresy within the church. Now, there's a term I'm going to use called Gnosticism. It's a word you might be familiar with, but it sounds old. It is a Greek philosophy. And we go, oh, what good is it to me to learn about it? Well, it might surprise some of you that we live in a very Gnostic age today. Gnosticism means that it was a kind of a dualistic way to look at the world. And what I mean by that is that there was the physical world, which the Greeks viewed as evil. And then there's this inner spiritual world that the Greeks viewed as good. So one of the great things to do in life was to always get in touch with this inner voice, this inner self. Meanwhile, all the physical world is evil. So later on, in another later New Testament book, 1 John, the author of that book says, if anyone claims that they're without sin, and we look at that and we say, wait a minute, there's people there that claim they never did anything wrong, That's completely missing the point. The point is not that whether they did wrong things or right things. Their view is, wait a minute, I'm separate from my evil body that I was born into. Therefore, the quest of life has become separate from this physical world, and so the stuff I do doesn't count against me. I know that doesn't really make sense to us, but that's kind of where they are. Now, Gnosticism was this system, and there was a Godhead with many spirit gods in it. This sounds strange to us, I understand. Well, one of those gods became kind of jealous and was kicked out. And as a result, this spirit world was imbalanced. And this jealous God, in response to being kicked out of the Godhead, something the Greeks called the demiurge, the pleroma, the fullness, and if we read Colossians, the fullness is a word that Paul uses again and again, and probably in response to this viewpoint. Well, this evil God went down and created a physical world and set up residence in this physical world. And that God's name in Gnosticism was Yahweh. And so then Gnosticism became this quest to redeem people from this evil world. And they did it by just gaining this inner knowledge within. If you could just listen to your inner self, if you could just become true to the inner voice, then everything would be right. Now, that sounds very familiar and that sounds very modern. Some of what we do now is very Gnostic. Sometimes even in the church we view as this world has to be overcome, this body has to be overcome. And so if we can just get separated from this evil world and go to this wonderful place up there, then that's what heaven is, this wonderful spirit place. That's not Christian. It is very Gnostic. That's not what we're to do. We are to transform and be part of this great transformation project, a new heaven and a new earth. I did want to spend the last part of this on this one line in Philippians. Maybe it'll spark a thought within you. Maybe it'll spark debate. Philippians chapter 3. Paul writes that he was a Pharisee of Pharisees, that according to his Jewish heritage, he lived this wonderful life. And then he has this word. According to following all the rules of the law, according to legalistic righteousness, he was faultless. He was blameless. Are you listening to what Paul's saying? Paul is saying, I kept every rule perfectly. Does that describe you? Probably not. However, it does change the way we think about some things. If Paul kept every rule perfectly, then why did he need to have his experience with God on the Damascus Road? See, here's what we hear in our churches sometimes. Oh, the problem with the law is, the problem with the rule book is we can't keep it. We all fail. And because we failed, Jesus sent his son. And because Jesus sent his son, then what? Well, if the problem is that I can't keep all the rules perfectly, if the problem is I can't keep the law, then what's the solution? The solution is Jesus came so that now, post-Jesus, now I can keep all the rules perfectly. Here's the problem. Paul says he was already there. And he said, I kept all the rules perfectly, and he was faultless. And then he said, what I once considered to my profit, he once considered keeping all the rules to be a plus for him, I now consider a loss. I now consider it worthless. The purpose of Christianity is not to make bad men good, and it's not to make you able to keep all the rules. There are some evil people that can keep all the rules. There are people that hate everyone that keep all the rules. And they use the rules to beat other people up with. The purpose of Jesus Christ is to make dead people alive. And to make unloving people loving. And ungraceful people full of grace. That's what Paul was trying to help us with that line in Philippians. But we miss it too much because it's easier to keep all the rules than it is to live a life full of love and grace. That's what Paul's getting to in Philippians. I hope that's what we're getting to in our lives as well. Not more rule keeping, not being better, but being more graceful. This is a story from my life. It's not a surprise to people know me. I like to golf a little bit, and sometimes I'm out golfing, maybe with a friend or maybe by myself, and I get paired up with somebody else, or they send me out with two other people. And at some point in the conversation, they always ask me, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" I've learned I never respond, "Oh, I'm a pastor," because then they start acting weird, and they start clean up language, and they start apologizing for, all those words I said when I hooked the ball into the water on 14. I apologize. I don't care, because again, the purpose of Christianity is not to be sure your life is all cleaned up. It's to be sure that your insides are changed, to make dead people alive. That's what Philippians is all about as well. I hope you like our channel. If you do, like us, subscribe to us. Hey, give us a question. Disagree with us. Ask us a further question. We'll answer it. We'll get around to it. Next week, when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about Gnosticism and what it looked like then and what it looks like in our culture and how that can lead us down a wrong path. We'll be right in the middle of Colossians again, but we're right in the middle of it today. Thanks for joining us. See you back here next week.